13 is a brand founded for the creators, the innovators, and the motivators, for the people who get up every single day and strive to be better and leave a positive mark on this world. 13 is a fantastic clothing company, and the people that are behind it are passionate, creative, and some of the nicest people I have ever met. All of their stuff looks great, it's comfy, all the designs are so super cool. 13 has some of my favorite t-shirts and seriously my favorite pair of sweatpants I have ever worn. 13 has been a longtime sponsor and supporter of the Cory cast, and they wanted to extend their love to you, the listener. So when you check out their website at thur13en.com, fill your cart with some cool hats, hoodies, sweatpants. Just make sure you use the code word CoryCast at checkout and you're going to save yourself a little bit of money. thur13en.com. Make sure you tell them Cory sent you. My guest today is a local radio show host, Scott Dixon. He is the voice of 95X on your weekday drive from 2 to 7 p.m. When we were promoting the Dungeons and Donations charity event, he welcomed us with open arms to talk about our charity and what we were doing. And I quickly learned that Scott is not only a generous human being, but he's also extremely genuine, which I think is what pulls me to him. He has had quite the interesting story of how he got into radio, and he even got very transparent on a dark part of his life. And I want to give you a trigger warning now. If talking about suicide or dark thoughts triggers you in any way, shape, or form, please make sure you skip that part. Scott does give plenty of heads up notice. But with that aside, I quickly learned about how amazing Scott is. His rise, fall, and rebirth like a phoenix was fantastic. And Scott is just a cool dude, man. Like, he just gives a shit about the people that are in Syracuse, the bands that are here, and he's a great human being. So this podcast is going to showcase how awesome Scott is. So make sure you show Scott Dixon some love. The 95X host, your weekday drive from 2 to 7 p.m. Make sure you hit him up on his social media. I'll put it in the links below and tell him that Cory sent you. So here is my guest, Scott Dixon.
It's okay.
So
yeah,
like,
no
just so you're aware, I'm fully cognizant. I'm just like, I get enamored by looking at you.
And then the screen, like my camera's right here.
My camera's there and you're over here.
Yeah, I know, right? It's weird, right? Especially.
And I've got two screens and I can't figure out how to make it work.
One day, my dream is to have my own podcast studio where I can like invite people in. We don't have to worry about that. I can talk to people in person because I feel like those conversations are just way better than
I mean, if Hot Ones has taught us anything over the years, man, there's got to be that personal moment where you're bonding over something in real time.
Yeah, with Hot Ones is just pain. It's hot. A
lot of times it's pain.
And pain.
Yeah,
dude, Scott Dixon, dude, the man on 95X. I really excited you're doing this. One, because you're a wonderful human being. Two, I love the stuff that you do, not only just with 95X, but the segments of 95X, not just on the air, but also like the community cares and all those special little things you do. I think it's really, really awesome. And that's how we connected, was when we did our Dungeons and Donations thing. You were the first one who was like, let's talk, let's do some stuff. And we fell in love with you immediately, Scott.
Well, I appreciate that. The food bank is very close to my heart and will always be an organization that I support with 100% of everything I have. I mean, for those that don't know me, right, like I do afternoons on 95X. I've booked shows for years and years, and we'll touch on that, but I'm going back to that as well. But I grew up on the southwest side of the city with a single mom who wasn't always a great mom. And we relied in my youth a lot on the Central New York Food Bank and the food pantries that existed on the southwest side of the city that we had access to. Um, and I'll never forget that because I remember being a little kid and like knowing you're poor, right?
Right.
Like in the things you have to do in school, and then being able to go and get food from food pantries that are food bank centric, right? That are there and taking care of the community. That instilled a few things in me at a very early age. The first was, understanding need, right? Like understanding that like there's classes, right? Like, and I mean that in the sense of economic classes. And
Yeah,
that's
right.
a tough thing to come to as like a 5 or a 6-year-old. But
Yeah,
I felt
especially
like
as a little kid.
yeah, absolutely. And I felt like it dawned on me, after maybe like the third trip to the food pantry that like this is basically saving my mother and I. And I held on to that memory for so many years. And, um, through my 20s and 30s, I was a wild man who didn't go really out of the way to do much, right? Like if you asked to do a benefit at the club, I was 100% in. If you asked my band to play your benefit, I was in. Do you have anything cool you can donate? Yes. But I wasn't proactive in doing anything for the community at large because I was so focused on the music community. And when I started at 95X in 2012 and found out that there was a relationship there between Cumulus Media and our brands, which are 95X, 93Q, and the Signal Syracuse, um, it reminded me of being 5, 6 years old
Yeah.
and in standing in line for a bag of stuff you didn't want, but you knew you needed, right? Like there was always like a big block of Velveeta type cheese and 4 boxes of pasta and instant mashed potatoes and powdered milk. And, like all your friends are getting Frankenberry,
Lunchables.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like you got to give like your number to the lunch lady so that you get your free lunch. That stuck with me, man. And for me, I know how hard it is to be that kid, but at the same time, it's like without the food bank, would he even have that? So for me, I try and jump into everything they do and put my all into it. So in stumbling across you guys who were taking something that I thought was very interesting into the charity world, which is the role playing game Dungeons and Dragons, and using your hobby, like the ingenuity to take something that's joyful for you and monetize it in a way that helps the community, to me is like this really endearing thing that I don't think more than maybe 2 out of 10 people have. So the minute I heard that A, you guys were doing this, B, you're doing it for the food bank, I was all in. I'm very intrigued. Um, I said I was going to try and dig into the D&D world a little bit, and as far as I got was watching the last season of Stranger Things. So I apologize for not being any more knowledgeable in that world now. But
Yeah,
like
that was the cool thing was like when we were putting this idea together, we were like, I think if we do a global charity, well, I just don't think we would get the type of buy-in. And then we're like, okay, if we do local, right? There's great organizations like the Salvation Army, Meals on Wheels, all these different places. But to us, like the food bank seemed like such a crucial part to Central New York. And like I was lucky, I never had to experience that. Mike didn't, Dennis didn't, but Dennis, being a school teacher, has seen those kids who are affected by the need for food. And it's so crazy to me that we're in 2023 and there's still so much food scarcity in Syracuse. It's heartbreaking. So we were like, let's do something that people will genuinely feel like is helping and growing our community. And you've met Lynn, right? Over at the food bank?
absolutely, Lynn
Oh my
and
God,
I
isn't she just
go
the
way
most
back.
wonderful human being?
She,
She's so nice.
she definitely is, and
Yeah.
she's done a lot with me in the Instagram live space. We've done podcasts. I've had her on the air. We've hung out at the fair. She's just, I think that if she ever wanted to, she could do radio.
Yeah, she's
Such
great.
a
She's a natural,
various
right?
personality, and she's very well spoken. And I think that she's an integral part of the successes that they've had since she's been there. Taking nothing away from the entire staff there, because working that nonprofit world is a difficult life to
That's a
jump
grind.
into, right? Like it's a lot of hard work that is emotional on a multitude of levels, and it doesn't pay what a corporate job or a private owned business pays. But like, I say it about radio all the time too, is it's like a lot of times you can get paid by being able to like exercise your passion. And those people at the food bank are very passionate about what they do.
Oh yeah.
And man, I'm so stoked that everything that we've done over the last few years with the online piece, and then doing the radiothon every year, and they do the telethon as well, where we go out and answer the phones and talk to people in the community, right? And I've done the demonstration a bunch of times, but like $5 literally buys a TV tray's worth of food for a
Yeah.
family. Like
Crazy.
for a single mom and a kid, that $5 feeds them for 2 full days,
Yeah. Isn't that insane? When she
right?
was we hooked it up when we called the food bank and we're like, hey, we have this idea, but before we pull the trigger, we just want to make sure we have your blessing before we do that. And they got Lynn right on the phone, and Lynn told us to come to the food bank so she can give us a tour. And we were walking through this place, like how well oiled of a machine it is, how well it's run to a T. And dude, that is to the credit of how passionate those people are to organize those processes and get the food out to people who really need them.
Absolutely. I have, right before the pandemic hit, Lynn and I had the conversation where I was going to get together a group of musicians or industry people, some radio people, some musicians, and we were just going to go for 4 hours once a month with I was going to bring a different group of people, right? And we were just going to volunteer for 4 hours to work out in the warehouse, and just like usually during the summer when it's like apples or like 2 pallets of zucchini that have to get split up into all of these different smaller containers. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm immunocompromised, and my wife loves me so much that I basically stayed in my house for 18 months because it was a scary time. And again, right, like staying completely away from opinion when you're immunocompromised and something like that's happening, and you have things in your life of value like a wife and family or kids, which I don't have, but you take it a little more seriously, right? Like I'm not a news guy, I'm not a politics guy, right? Like I'm that Gen X dude that has lived my life in a way where like not much phases me,
Yeah, right.
right? Like and usually in that situation before I became immunocompromised, I would have been the dude that was just like, whatever, dude, I'm gonna go out, right? Like I'm gonna go hang out, whatever.
I'll be fine. I'll make it through.
Yeah, not in like a ostentatious way, right? Like not in
Yeah.
a way where like you're gonna see yourself on Instagram or TikTok,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like no public freak out. But I would have been far more careless.
Yeah.
Right. So we've been cleared for about a year now, and life got out of hand. But I think you guys have a passion for doing this. I know on my side, there's a lot of people on my staff that have a passion for it. I think maybe we explore the idea of the three of you, three of us, we go, we do it, right? And we shoot. I mean, we I think there's enough, talent and know-how between the two groups that we can make a very educational video that's also kind of fun to put out to let people know, hey, this is what you do. Volunteer at the food bank, right? Like you don't want to take money out of your pocket. I get that. The economy is a little soft right now. Go volunteer your time.
Yeah. 2 hours on a weekend.
Yeah.
Right. They got blocks and schedules all over the place you can take, and they need the volunteers.
They certainly do. And cnyfoodbank.org, we'll leave it at that so that this doesn't turn into.
Yeah. Lynn right now is like, yes,
she's like, hey guys,
yeah.
my son's in the room.
She's wonderful. I like her.
Yeah.
How did you even like? It's cool how sometimes people get into their career in their field. How did you even get into radio?
That is actually a fun story. So flashback, I'm running Bridge Street Music Hall, which is now a Tracy Equipment Warehouse on 290 out by the old Doug's Fish Fry. Big A-frame building. I had fallen out with the new owners of the club I had worked at downtown that had purchased Armory High, which at one time was Stylene's. So I'm managing the bar. We've got a show. It's a battle of the bands, and it's for a competing radio station that I don't like saying out loud. Not in a dickish way, just like, we're not in competition with them anymore. At the time I worked, right, like at Bridge Street Music Hall, it was another radio station's night that was doing a battle of the bands with Molson. And then this new radio station that at the time, it doesn't exist, so I'll say it out loud, Rock 105, The Dog. They all showed up in a limo.
Whoa, The Dog. I remember that.
Yeah. They all rolled in. And I immediately went and addressed it as the dude that ran the club of like, hey, it's the other station's night, right? Like, this is kind of rude. And they're like, we just want to watch some bands and we just want to drink at the bar, right? Like, you know, we just all happen to be wearing the shirt. And it's like, I gave them credit for having the balls to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you call yourself the lunatic fringe of American FM, because that was their slogan. And you do that the first week that you go on the air, unless somebody from that other station says kick them out, you're welcome here. Your money's good.
Yeah.
So I go back to bartending, running around, doing changeovers. And I go back in the back room, I don't know, cups, whatever we had to go get. And I hear Scorch on the PA system from the stage on mic. Like basically just talking about this new station. And I was a 380 to 400 pound human being at this point, ran as fast as I could to the PA and told the sound guy to cut the mic. I threw them all out. And I may or may not have, there's a rumor that their credit card that got left behind got charged a $400 asshole tax. It was so long I don't remember.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly that's what happened. So they leave. The woman who was in charge at the time calls the next day, wants her credit card back. I meet her. She gets her credit card back. And she was flirty in a way that wasn't like hitting on me, but in a way where like I felt like I was being like felt out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like almost like it was basically job flirting, right? Like it was just like
now, Scott, now that I have my credit card, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Less that, but like more like personality test, right? Like asking me like pointed questions about my radio knowledge, which all I really knew was like radio from Syracuse. So fast forward like 3 weeks and I get an email from her, like on my personal email, back when we all had like .rr.com email.
Yeah, CNY.
Yeah.
CNY, yeah.
And it's this lady, Erin Bristol, who was the program director of the station. And she was like, hey, listen, I've been like doing a lot of like asking around about you. And it seems like you're really, really well connected to the local music scene. I know that you're doing Hellfest this summer. And we would like to get involved, right? Like we're playing bands like Hatebreed that you're bringing to Syracuse, and we're playing bands like Killswitch Engage that you just had at Planet 505, right? And I was like, that's cool, right? Like if you want to give me free advertising, I'll let you guys come up and be at the shows because like they're all neutral. You can't come in and hang up signs, but if you want to put your truck in the parking lot, I'm not going to tell you no, right? Like you want to get here an hour early and talk to the kids in line, I can't stop you. So we started that way. And then she had an event and wanted to put a couple local bands on it. So she hit me up again. And then one of the bands that she wanted to book was a band I managed. So I think that was I know he'll come along if his band is playing a radio show thing, which I did. And we had another conversation that night, right? And then we get through Hellfest. We get through a couple other things, and then I get a phone call from a number I don't know, and it's Erin again, and she's like, "Hey, listen, I've been thinking about it because I came to Hellfest, I saw what that community was about, and I'd like to put a 2-hour show on the air of that music with you hosting it." And I was like, "Interesting. So you want to play hardcore on the radio?" And
Unheard of.
right, like, because this is 2003, right? So this is kind of the height of metalcore, right? Like this is where Orange County, California was on fire with 18 Visions and Bleeding Through and like Throwdown, that whole set, right? Like you had the Boston scene with the bands like Bane and Since the Flood, right? Like Florida. I mean, it's always Florida.
It's always Florida.
Yeah, like there's really no way to describe the scene down there minus like Fest, which is like a pop punk thing. So I was like, I'll have to think about it, right? Like, because I never saw myself doing that, and like I'm sort of like this dude that works for myself. I don't want to work for a massive corporation, right? Because like I'm in my mid-20s at this point, right? Like, and I've always been like, when you grow up on Fugazi, you don't really take the phone call from the people at Clear Channel asking you to have a job, right? So,
yeah.
I thought about it from the perspective of I'm gonna Robin Hood this, right? Like I'm gonna get in, and then I'm gonna put like hardcore into the lexicon of Central New York, and in the end, more people will come to the shows that I'm working or booking.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, right?
I saw it as basically like a 2-hour block of free advertising.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And she's like, okay, well, I can give you minimum wage for the 2 hours of the show. And I was like, because it was Friday nights, 10 to midnight. And I was just like, I work every Friday night from like 6 p.m. till 3 in the morning. So like, we got to figure out how to pre-record this.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I literally got paid, and I think in 2003, minimum wage was like $6.35.
Oh.
For some reason, that number is sticking in my mind. And I got paid bi-weekly. And I remember my paycheck, every time she would set it in my mailbox, was for $4.01. Right? Like I did two shows. Basically, I got paid $2. I got paid $2. I got $1 an hour to do bare knuckle radio.
Yeah.
In 2003. So fast forward, it wasn't even a month. And at the time, I was bouncing booking shows, working with SyracuseShows.com. Like I was young. I was just living my life and trying to just have fun while making money. Right. Like
in the music, like entrenched in the music scene.
Yeah. And that's the dream. But at the time I was dating a girl who was a manager at this place called Great Northern Pizza Kitchen, which was a Buffalo place, but they had one in Fayetteville, and like where the town center is now, like literally where Munjed's is. So I was like, you know what? I'll just deliver pizza for lunch, right? Like it's one more thing that I can stack money with. So I went there, and then like within a couple of weeks, they were having me like, I was a culinary minor in college, and I may or may not have experienced some left-handed cigarettes during my pizza delivery experience, right? So like when you have a culinary background and you're not of sound mind, you make some dope stuff right after lunch with the leftovers from the stuff that's about to go out of like time, right? That you have to throw out.
Have to expire, right?
On the rack, right? So like you come up with some wild stuff, and a lot of it ended up making like the daily menu. Right. So like I was having fun. Like I had my little pizza gig for a few months, and then I took the radio gig. So I had this radio gig on top of the pizza gig, and the gig.
And when you took the radio gig, was it still just like 2 hours?
Yeah, it was literally. So 3 weeks in, the kid that was doing the local music show that started a couple months before I started there moved out of town, so I inherited that too.
Oh, nice.
And that was Sunday nights for an hour. That was called The Backyard. So at that time, I had 5 shows under my belt. 5. I had filled in on nights via the recorder once, and then I was on live a couple of times with Scorch in the afternoon, just having a conversation like this. right? I get a phone call from Scorch, middle of the pizza shift. Hey, bro, I'm gonna need you to come down to the office today. And I was like, why? What's up? He's like, trust me, bro. Good stuff. Good stuff. Uh, try and get here as soon as you can. What time you get done? So I don't even change. Like I don't shower, nothing. I smell like I worked in a pizza shop all morning. I roll into their like conference room, like total, like and like that. It was that moment I walked in and I was like, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I was like, oh man, I think I'm about to touch the devil's dick. And because it was like 4 dudes on one side of a table,
All in a suit.
yeah, like too much
Scott,
suit, right?
yeah,
Like
Scott covered
top
in
of the
flour.
line Men's Warehouse, right? Like 4 different shades of gray.
Yeah.
That might have been because I'm colorblind, but that was the impression I got. And then Scorch in a chair, and our other coworker in a chair, and then an empty chair in the middle, which I knew was intended for me. And I roll in and I sit down. And they're like, all right, so due to some things that are out of our control, we had to let the program director go today. And I was like, oh, it sucks. She was really nice. I liked her. And then the president of the company looked at me and goes, we're making you the new program director. And I literally did this, bro. Who? Right? Like you're what? And they're like, yeah, you're gonna be the new program director. And I was like, why? Right? Like,
Excuse me, sir. I'm covered in flour.
yeah, why me? Right? Like in that moment, I also felt 2 totally different reactions. I felt like a total deflation, and then I felt like a total like, what the, right? Like,
Yeah.
so now like I'm in this vortex of sad, mad. What are you thinking? Right? Like, so I was like, I don't understand how you're making me the new program director. I feel like that's like a job offer interview situation. So
Yeah.
I may also have been under the influence of the devil's lettuce at this time. So it was a wild moment. And they were just like, well, listen, you've got business acumen and we've heard you on the air and it's not bad. So we just feel like we can teach you how to run the station and then you wouldn't have to have 5 jobs. And I was like, well, I could totally quit the pizza place, right? Like if you needed me for a few hours in the afternoon. And they're like, well, are going to be on the air from 10 to 2. And like, had they done it a different way, I probably would have accepted on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of dude like where 4 dudes in a suit aren't going to tell me that I'm doing middays and taking the radio station over. Like there's a defiant streak in me when it comes to being told what to do by old irrelevant men that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Right. So I was just like, you know what? Why don't you figure out what you can do for me, what you can offer me, and then we'll circle back to this on Monday.
I love that, dude. I love that.
And I just remember being like, are we done? Because I've got, like, I got to go shower and get to the bar. Right. Like, and it wasn't even like I had to get to the bar for work. I just had to get to the bar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was late enough in the day that like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And obviously I took the gig, which was
It's amazing.
It was a nightmare, dude, right? Like I fell ass backwards into radio in the weirdest possible way. Zero experience. I have a bachelor's degree in marketing with a minor in culinary arts. Never had any interest in being on the radio, right?
Yeah.
Never, like, was never a childhood dream. I obviously listened to the radio because I like music. So to be thrust into this thing that I knew nothing about, like
also didn't care about, like you weren't like, I can't wait to be a radio show host when you're younger.
No, like my first dream as a little kid was, strangely enough, like I was obsessed with like I think I want to be a mortician.
Yeah.
Right? Like 8, 9 years old. I was like, I could make a living with dead people, I think. Right? Like because I was very antisocial as a kid, and that just felt like a natural thing. And I also had like a lack of self-awareness at the time, right? Like when I moved into this house with my wife 10, 11 years ago, brought all my stuff from the old place, started digging through it to get rid of stuff. I found cassettes of my first 2 live on the air shifts. Because at the time there was a cassette recorder, like a deck recorder in the studio. You would put a blank tape in, and every time you push the microphone button, it automatically made the cassette player record, and it would just record all your breaks. So when you turn the mic off, it shuts the recorder off. It was 2003. Those of you that don't know what a cassette is, it's and I made the mistake of putting it in, right? And like, it is literally me yelling as loud as I can about how much I love Hatebreed into a microphone while introducing Live for This. Right? Like, I kicked off everybody's morning at 10 a.m. with Live for This by Hatebreed on a radio station. And I have a recording of me being awful at doing it. It's like,
well, that was your first time though, right?
It was my first time being live. Like, when you record it, like, you do it and then you listen back to it and then you insert it, right? Like, you have the ability when you're live, right? Like, and I'm very much an adrenaline guy. Like, if I'm nervous, it's the same thing if I like have too much Red Bull. Like, it's just like, let's go. Right? Like, it comes this thing, and then like, as soon as the mic comes on and you see the light, I was just like, yo, you know what I love? Hatebreed. And it's just like, not a great look, but also it was 2003.
Yeah. Right.
So I did that for 4 years. And then, you know, corporate America being corporate America, I got scumbagged, and they decided they wanted to go in a different direction with the radio station. And I was just like, what's the last day we're going to be on the air? And it was like 4 weeks away. I was like, that's my last day. And they were just like, okay. And I was like, do I need to write a letter of resignation? And they're like, yeah. And I literally remember going into my office, grabbing a piece of paper off of my printer and writing, I quit on date.
Scott Dixon.
And then literally just signed my name. And I just walked back and I set it on their desk. And I was like, we good?
We good here?
Yeah. Cause like, it was my last year there was like, my whole goal was to make everybody uncomfortable. There was somebody there, again, who will remain nameless because I don't want to get you or me sued. It was my job to make him uncomfortable and dread seeing me every day. My last 4 weeks there, I typically walked around barefoot in the most
barefoot, Scott? That's chaotic behavior.
Right? And I would refer to everybody as F word plus ER.
Oh, okay. You can swear on this too.
Oh, so like literally like everybody except the nice old lady at the front desk. When I would say, I'd be like, "What's up, fucker? What are you gonna do? Fire me?"
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, I gave you 4 weeks notice. I'm leaving on the last day that I'm going to be on the air of this radio station. I have no intention of staying and doing anything else for you. You've done me dirty. I'm out. And I'm going to milk these last 4 weeks for every little bit of enjoyment I can get. And again, if I can make a rich, comfortable, old, irrelevant white man in corporate America uncomfortable for even 3 seconds, I revel in it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are advantages to being a stockily built, bald dude with a giant beard who's covered in tattoos in my world.
Yeah. How, when that was going on, how big were you?
Oh, dude, I was 375 pounds. And at the time, I also did the big Van Vader haircut and grew the horns in on the side because that's where the hair grows.
Yes.
Right? Like, so I was like, I have to be the most like alpha dickhead I can be. Right. So like, it was truly amazing for me in so many ways, but also bittersweet, right? Like, because you're leaving. You just threw 4 years of your life into this thing with everything you got, and they're snatching it from you for what? Right? Like, because they think they have a better idea than what you're doing. You know what? Right. The thing they replaced me with lasted half the time that I lasted.
Yeah.
Right? And then they sold the tower. So it's like, was I wrong or were you wrong? Right? Like, we could have made some money together for a little bit longer. Yep. So in 2007, when I left, it was like August. I had been still doing shows, still working nights. I've had
Still
insomnia.
booking shows and stuff.
Yeah, so I was booking shows, I was working shows, I would throw bartending shifts, I would DJ some gentlemanly type clubs because there's money there, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I was just doing what I do, stockpiling money, and then like I realized I had hid $8,000 from myself, accidentally, right? Like it's one of those things where like you put money away with the intent of using it for something, and
Yeah.
then you kind of lose it. And most people do that with like a couple $100 or like a 20 in a coat pocket. I did it with a little over $8,000 wrapped in tinfoil.
What? You
Yeah,
forgot about it?
kinda.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens.
So I happened to find it like third week of the work tenure, and I was like, yo, I've got $8,000 that I did not expect to have. I'm gonna take a couple months and just not worry about what comes next, right? Like let's just ride a little wave, right?
All
'Cause
on black, baby.
yeah, we had done Hellfest had kind of come and gone, and the hardcore scene was in like this, I don't want to say downtime, right? Because it wasn't down, but from an artistic and ideological point, right? Like we had left the hardcore realm and entered scene status,
Mhm.
right? Like where the haircuts were more important than what was coming through with the lyrics, right? Like it
Right.
became this haircut thing.
Skinny, stud. I
Yeah,
remember studded belts. I had a
yeah.
lot of different
Studded
studded belts.
belts, the tightest skinny jeans you could find, the hair that
Dude,
that
I
and then
gotta
the
find
girls
it.
had
I'll
the bangs with they called it the shotgun blast,
yeah.
right? Like it was worst fashion ever, right? Like I remember like making fun of like the 80s glam dudes, like the poisons and stuff.
Oh yeah, this
I
scene
don't know
really
what's
didn't
more
get.
cringy, like
Yeah.
early 2000s emo or 80s glam rock, because like if you're either of those groups of people, you're going to be embarrassed at some point.
Oh, dude, I'm 1,000% embarrassed. I wasn't so totally into like the scene. I just had a lot of group of friends that were like that. I definitely had big baggy hair, but the second you said scene kids, immediately thinking like Hawthorne Heights, like
Oh
put my wrist in black, my eyes, like
yeah, exactly, right? Like every band that reunited for We Were Young last year.
yes, yes.
Yeah. And it's
Exactly.
weird, right? Because like you're a lot younger than me, but like one thing that I will tell you, younger people, is that like when they tell you that as you get older, time goes quicker, that is one true fact, right? Like because 2003 does not feel 20 years ago. It does not feel like 20 years ago I started my radio journey, or that we had done the biggest Hellfest to date, or right, like we had like almost 40 sold out shows in 2003. Um, it feels like a couple of years ago,
Yeah, that's
right? Like
true.
the
It really
same
is.
way that it doesn't feel like it was 3 years ago that the pandemic started, right? Like that first month of the pandemic felt like it took 2 years. And now
Dude,
in
it took so
hindsight,
long.
it feels like it was a few months ago,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Like, so
1,000%.
your time perception in this modulation that we all live in gets really skewed as you get older. So
Yeah.
enjoy every minute is the best advice I can give you. Soak, if you're
Amen.
feeling joy, if you're truly happy in a moment, literally stop, soak it in, and take a mental picture. Because otherwise, you're going to end up like me with like Swiss cheese for a memory, where like you have to get people to give you like 3 clues to even jar something loose. And you go, and then half the time you lie and you're just like, oh, I do remember that. That was
I d
great.
I do remember. I just don't want you to repeat yourself a fourth and fifth time.
Yeah, man. But yeah, for you younger set, man, by the time when you hit 30, it's like you're driving up the ramp on 81, right? Like you're not quite on 81, you're not really going, but you're ready to go.
Mhm.
And then when you hit 40, you're merging. You're in the right lane and you're going probably 65, realistically, probably 70. When you hit 45, you're just like, I think I should probably hang out in the middle lane, keep it at 72, not get a ticket. Right. And then I'm 49, man, and I feel like yesterday was 2020. Right. Like if you told me like yesterday was New Year's Eve 2020, I'd be like, that checks out.
Yep.
And meanwhile, here we are. It's like almost May of 2023. You know, like there's that line in The Office that I'm not going to say right, but it's just like you don't realize they were the good old times.
Yeah.
Right. So you're out of
in the moment.
the
Yeah.
good old times. Right.
Yeah.
So like truly one of the things that I would encourage everybody to do, like that's what the pandemic taught me. Right. And I learned that strangely from all people of Vance Joy, where it's like every once in a while, just stop and look up. And it was eye-opening to the fact that like, man, I've been because at the time of the pandemic, that was my 9th year at 95X. And I realized like, where did those 9 years go? Because all I do is like things like we're doing now is like a fun thing to do. But for the most part, I just stare at 2 screens for 10 hours a day and talk for 15 seconds at a time, 4 times an hour, 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it's,
goes so quick.
Yeah. So to take that mindful advice and look up, and I know that he intended phone as the intended look up from, but like, it's a good reminder for me to like on a day like today, I literally like, I did a break and I was like, I would like to go outside. And I went and did the mental math on the 3 songs. And I was like, I have 11 minutes and I'm going to go stand in the sun today. I'm going to feel the sun on my face. I'm going to breathe clean air and I'm going to go back there and be a better version of myself. And it happened and I was stoked.
Yeah. And then you become a better version of yourself on air. And we went off on a COVID tangent, but you were talking about how you were coming back to 95X, right? After you had left. How long have you guys parted ways for before you came back?
No. I started at 95X in 2012. It's been continual since then.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Rock 105 The Dog, 2003, 2007.
Okay.
In that interim, I did all the stuff that I always do and then a few extra things, right?
Okay.
Like, you know, booking shows, bouncing, bartending. Late 2008, 2009, I joined the Lost Horizon team full time.
Oh, nice. I probably saw you at a couple shows and didn't even realize.
I was a much, much larger human being with a much smaller beard at the time. You know, if you knew me before 2012, you know a different version of the guy that's sitting in front of you right now. That was a much different human being, both physically and in every other possible way. And I fully acknowledge the fact that like I was not the best person for a very long time. You know, and I'm not going to use an excuse for it, right? Like I was an adult and I made bad decisions that led to being a not great version of myself, right? Like,
but you were the adult and you learned from that and became a better human being for it, right?
We hope so. Like my goal is to be better tomorrow than I was today, even in incremental way, both in my career and as a man, right? Like, and I don't mean that in the antiquated, like I'm a man, right? Like it's not like the quote unquote toxic masculinity. It's just like I come from a generation where, right? Like, and again, like cancel me for it if you want, but I think that there are certain things that if you have the same mindset that I do and you're a man and you acknowledge that it's not about gender, it's about a set of standards that you set for yourself and the people you let into your life. Right? Like it's big things like you never put your hands on a woman. Right? Yeah. Like I think that's like a standard thing. Right? Like it's, you know, you are a stand-up person for your friends. right? Like you risk yourself for those you care about, right? And I don't, it's not like a testosterone driven thing, but it's like the way I grew up is a poor kid on the southwest side of the city, and then growing into and becoming a part of the hardcore scene, and then an elder statesman in the hardcore scene. As a kid that never had family, right? Like it was like this brotherhood that my younger life of being the
Needed.
outcast, right? Like and
Yeah, it
being
needed that sense of brothership, right?
alone. Right. I mean, I essentially for the most part raised myself from the age of 8 and got emancipated at the age of 15 and have been on my own ever since. I've lived with girlfriends, whatever. Obviously, my wife and I live together and have for the last 11 years. But like again, right? Like I'm not saying my life has been harder than anybody else's because I'm very fortunate, right? It's just we're all an accumulation of the things we've experienced. Right? Like the person you are now, you would not be had one thing in your past changed because it alters the path. Right? Like, and that's not any sort of, and again, right? Like, in addition to not being political or any of that, right? Like, I'm also not like a religious dude in any way. I'm not anti-religion. I'm not for religion. I'm very much hey, listen, if you want to live your life and it doesn't affect me or others in a negative way, you should be able to do that thing. Right? Like I'm all
1,000%.
for whatever it is that you want to do as long as you do it for you and it doesn't harm other people. Right? Like I'm
Amen.
an
Yeah.
open-minded guy, right? Like I understand that we're all different, weird people, right? We're all weird.
All weirdos.
Every single one of us have something that we're self-conscious about that just it occurs in every other human being, right? And it makes us weird. And some of us are awkward in different ways, right? It's right, like the sooner you come to the acceptance of that, I think the easier your going is, the better your life is, right? And I am an accumulation of everything good or bad that's happened to me. Most of those bad things were transpired by a poor upbringing and bad decisions in my younger adult years. And like I don't know that I would have had that aha moment to go, hey man, you're a piece of shit and you should probably stop being a piece of shit, right? Like, because like the thing I'll say is I never went out of my way in the ways that I do now for anything other than the music scene, right?
Had to
Like
be music, right?
I
Had to be music for you to step out of your lane.
yeah, and I would always help anybody that needed it, right? Like as long as you were a good person, but I was never proactive about it. And it wasn't until I had near death experiences and a multitude of health problems that we talked about off camera that is well documented. Like there's a podcast at 95x.com in the on demand section. If you want the whole story, go enjoy it. It's kind of gross. Just know that. It's also got a trigger warning on it. Just so you know, read the trigger warning. You realize coming so close to death, how much of your life you've pissed away. Right? Like, and for me, it was on nonsense, right? Like alcohol, eating like garbage, right? Like just all of these very self-indulgent, toxic behaviors made me who I was. And it's like, okay, well, why? Right? Like, why were you relying on alcohol? And it was, well, like, and again, right? Like, I feel like this is a therapy session. But like,
not at all.
Like my mother had me in the car for 2 different DWI related accidents under the age of 8 years old.
Oh,
Right? Like, so that's a core memory that you compartmentalize and you shove down. Right? Like it's very easy to put that in a corner of your mind that you don't look at until you are 15 and stealing cases of beer from your retail job every single time you work. Right? Like, because you're emancipated at 15 and the manager never comes out of his office and it's 1988 and there's no cameras, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like, oh, take the garbage out. Cool. I'm also going to take this case of beer and set it by the dumpster and grab it before I leave. Right? Like when you have access to
When
it.
you had that aha moment, do you remember where you were?
Oh,
Was it when you were in the hospital, or was it
No,
prior
it
to that?
was, well, again, I'll give the trigger warning now, right? Like I was in such a bad place that first day in the hospital, 2011. Full pancreatic failure. We're 4 months in. They got no answers. I've literally flatlined twice, and I had just had enough. Right. So like I have a pick line, which is the thing they put into the crease in your elbow. It's a long line, goes up your arm, across your chest, and into your left aorta. It's how they give you medication, nutrition, and antibiotics.
Oh wow.
So I had a little Jeopardy buzzer that I could push to get liquid pain medication, which was fentanyl,
Yeah.
which we've all heard plenty about in the news, right?
Yeah.
So no matter how many times you push the button, you only get the medicine every 6 minutes.
Yeah.
But when you lay there for 4 months, with this thing in your hand, it just becomes like a uh,
Six.
well, no, it's more of like the fidget spinner, right? Like it's in your hand, you play.
Oh,
Yeah, it's in
yeah.
your hand, you play with it, right?
Right.
Um, so like I had decided I had enough. I told them that the Jeopardy thing wasn't enough, and that I would need additional pain medication to manage the pain I was in. And then they would bring the pills in, and I would just like fake take it, and I stockpiled enough that I figured would be donezo, right? Like obviously there's something so wrong with me that they can't figure it out, that I'm going to die anyway. So I'm going to go on my terms, because I'm very much a my terms guy, right? So like I stockpiled all these pills, and the aha moment was my girlfriend at the time, who was actually my ex-girlfriend at the time, had brought me an iPod. And the only three things she put on it, because they were the only three things she could find in my iTunes that she knew I listened to a lot. There was a Manchester Orchestra album called Mean Everything to Nothing. There was the first Onacon, the Burning River record, but it was all like one track because I had kind of like ripped it in a weird way. So it wasn't, so it was like an hour and 6 minutes long, just one
The whole
track.
thing.
But there was also like Silver Sun Pickup Swoon on there. And there was something about being in an opiate haze, listening to your favorite band's favorite album, and finally getting it for the first time, right? I've been fortunate through my radio career to have this conversation with both Brian and Nikki from Silver Sun Pickups, right? Like I made Nikki cry on the phone one time, telling her the story of like, hey, I tried to kill myself to your music one time. It was
Right.
awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then you explain everything, and then I got to meet them, and then they came and played a show for us. It's been like this weird full circle moment, and strangely, man, it's very weird to accept the fact that like the day we had them play in Syracuse happened to be the exact day, like 9 years later,
Wow,
of
man, that's
the day
wild.
it happened, right?
Wow.
Weird how life works.
Yeah.
But I remember the moment being having, and I'm not going to say how many or what, right? Because I'm not trying to perpetuate any of that. But I
Yeah.
had what I thought was my final cocktail, and I just remember in the moment, right? Like I don't know why it was the thing that made me go, "What are you doing, dipshit?" There's a line in a song. It says, "There's a vulture perching right off screen." Right? So like I'm in a hospital bed. I'm loaded on fentanyl with a fistful of pills and the intent to take them all. And I hear there's a vulture perching right off screen. And I looked over, and it was like the one nurse that I didn't hate. And she was like, I didn't hear your buzzer, but I felt compelled to come in here. What's going on? And
Really? Wow.
like in that moment, I was just like, something just clicked, and the song kicked in to like where the guitar swelled, and it just sort of like washed over me of like, hey man, like don't treat this as the end, treat this as like the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, right? Like you are a book, and you just ended a chapter, right? Like let's let's take control of the narrative. Let's write the new chapter and write it the way we want to be instead of the way we are. And I just remember like finishing the song, stopping the iPad, pushing the nurse button, having Jen walk back into the room, and just admitting to her what I had done and handing them back to her and apologizing, not realizing that, you know, they were going to send like 6 counselors over the next 8 hours into the room to talk to me.
Yeah,
right.
right.
Like, it was like there was a nurse stationed in my room, right? Like for like 3 days. Yeah, I screwed up. I get it, right? Like I don't have any, right? Like, and they have to do it. But yeah, like there was some sort of weird mystical magic that occurred in that moment, and whether it was real or imagined, a figment of a fentanyl fever dream, right? Like it doesn't matter what it was, it happened in my consciousness, and it was the point where I realized like I don't have to be the aggressive and somewhat violent alcoholic bouncer that books shows and like has to do things the way we've always done them. It's like, how about this, man? Like, how about like we just decide that we're going to be better, right? Like, because coming out of this, I'm not able to drink. I haven't had a drop of alcohol since July 7th, 2011, right? Like that's coming from somebody that drank 2 bottles of tequila every day.
Wow.
I've not had a drop of alcohol in what will be 12 years come July 7th.
Bravo.
It's a constant struggle. Thank you. Here's the thing I'm going to say, right? Like I get weird about people congratulating me on it because like I'm held to a different standard than a typical alcoholic, because most alcoholics can have a drink, fall off the wagon, and get back on. I had a piece of roast beef at a Christmas party in 2012 that they didn't cook the cognac off of long enough, and I was in the emergency room for 36 hours.
Wow.
So essentially it was at that point we realized that if I had one drink, it would cause enough damage that I could potentially die, and that 2 definitely would.
Wow. Holy
so
cow.
I have a leg up on most alcoholics who are in recovery.
Wow.
Because I have no choice, right? Like I have to stay the straight and narrow, where like I've used up all my chances. And that's sort of where I've put my mind to it. It's like, bro, you had hundreds of chances to do what they're doing over the course of your adult life, and you chose not to do it until you ruined your body. So no, you did all your second chances. So now you're not going to drink.
This is it, Scott. This is your last chance. I
feel lucky that I'm at this point. And I know that that's kind of like a not the right state of mind to have, right? I know that I'm lucky because, again, I've used all of those options and I've changed my life enough that there is zero temptation anymore. I don't care about drinking. The thing that gets me to this day, and thank you, whoever, there's 0 alcohol beer now. So, dude, I'm living my best life.
Yeah, right. You just get to drink the Heineken Zeros, right?
I'm gonna make a lot of people mad, but I'm not a Heineken guy.
Okay.
I have an affection for Bud Zero, rainbow or no rainbow.
Hey, respect to you, dude.
0 alcohol beer, and it's one of those things that I think it's the culinary background. I was that dude that really enjoyed the taste of beer, and I know that that's not something that most people truly do, right? Like a lot of people just drink beer because it gets you drunk, and they tolerate what it tastes like. I liked beer, right? Like even cheap beer had its certain charms to me, right? Like that's why PBR had the Renaissance. So it's nice,
like everything that you went through. That was 2011, you said?
Yeah, it's the major catastrophic, my origin story, health-wise.
Yeah, dude, origin story.
July 11th.
2012 was
2011.
Started at 95X.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you about how I started at 95X, which is um, heartwarming, man, like in a multitude of ways. Like, again, I say this all the time. I'm very fortunate to have the people in my life that I do, because A, I wouldn't be here without them, and B, I wouldn't be the man I am today without them in a lot of ways. Um, so quick synopsis. At the time, my best friend, who is still my best friend to this day, Charles Spataro, was like a little brother to me. He's the dude that got me to the hospital in time. He's the dude that came and saw me every single chance he could. He rode his bicycle from my shitty apartment on 7th North Street to St. Joe's, sometimes twice a day, just to hang out and to make sure that I was good. He also rode that children's bicycle all over this city, picking up all the raffle prizes for the benefit they had for me when I got out of the hospital.
Wow.
I remember him texting me when I was in the hospital saying, man, I just left 95X and Joe D gave me a signed guitar, 3 or 4 other signed things, a huge stack of CDs, and like $800 in random gift certificates and gift cards for your raffle.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. Because literally 3 or 4 weeks before I had the health issue, Joe and I reconnected because he had done Scream Fest, which was like an I Hate God show with a bunch of other bands on it at the Lost. And then a few months later, we reconnected, and he was like, listen, I could use a part-timer. I know you swore off radio after your last stint, but man, I could really use somebody to do 2 to 7 on the weekends. It would take you an hour to do both. Right? Like, just I need somebody that can come in, that has a name, that knows what they're doing. You'll get that swing of it in a couple of weeks. And I was like, yeah, man, like, just let me figure out what's going on with me over the next couple of months. I was on again, off again with a long-term girlfriend. Right? Like, the Greg Italiano had just passed away. I was just learning the ropes of the new Lost Horizon with John Hannes, who again is somebody that I owe a debt of gratitude to. But then I was in the hospital, and Cha texted me, and then I realized, like, I had a bunch of missed calls from Joe D on my cell phone that I didn't notice, because he was calling me during regular hours, like daytime office hours. And even in the hospital, I was a night owl, so I would sleep all day, be up all night, minus like when they poke and prod me. And I realized, like, that dude called me every 3 days for like the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks I was in the hospital.
And you didn't even know it.
And I had no idea. So I just shot him a text. I was like, hey, man, thanks for checking in on me. I'll hit you up when I'm out of the hospital. And he's like, I hope everything's okay, whatever. And then, like, it was in that I had that moment of clarity of like, oh, man, I've known Joe for a long time. He was in Eddy Current back in the 90s. So he was in a band that I used to book in my first stint at Stylene's, 97, cool. 98. And then it turns out he's this dude that made this big donation. And I made a point in that moment that I was like, if I live through this, I will go and do weekends for Joe D at 95X.
Yeah.
Like, I owe him that. So, like, I got cleared to go back to work on January 1st, 2012. And immediately hit him up. I think it was like the 3rd, because the first fell on a weekend. And I was like, hey, man, let me know when you want me to start. I know I have to fill out paperwork. He's like, let's go. So I went. We started. Like 9 days later, I did my first air shift. First air shift, I show up, pull in to record, and a crazy girl that I had,
relations with?
Yeah. Once, right? Like, was sitting on the picnic table outside the building waiting on me. So, like, my first day there, like, I had to, like, use my fob to get into the building and then call the police and have them trespass her. And then I was like, it's my first day. Like, I should let Joe know this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like if I don't tell them this happened, that it makes me look even worse.
Makes you look terrible, Scott.
Right. So I pull out the phone. I call Joe, and it's like, hey, man, just as a heads up, I'm at the building. I'm about to track. There was an issue with the police. There was a girl that showed up here, and I had to have them trespass her because even though I carry a security license, right, like, I don't work for you in that capacity, and I don't know that it's totally legal. So I just wanted to make you aware that I didn't do anything wrong except for show up to work, and a crazy person was here. And he was like, "You're fine, man." And then I realized that like it was the Wild West in a lot of ways. So
That's so funny, dude. Your first day of work, you're just like, can't wait to start my new day. Oh God.
yeah, so it's weirder. So I record Saturday and Sunday, that Saturday morning. And then Joe calls me 10:30 Monday morning and is like, "Hey man, can you stop by the studio today? We need to talk." And I was like, okay, well, I guess I pissed this one away. So I was being new me, so I decided to hoof it from 7th North Street because I was like, "You need the exercise." So I walk all the way there, and like when I got out of the hospital in 2011, I was probably like 275 pounds. I was a big, fat, sweaty mess showing up at the 95X studio, like anxious.
yeah,
I'm like, they're gonna fire me. Also, like I just walked like 4.5 miles.
you're right.
So I roll in just sweating, and I was just like, "Listen, dude, I'm gonna go like towel myself down in the men's room, and I'll be right in. I'm here." And he just looked at me like I was the craziest person. I go
You're
into
so
the
sweaty. It's
Yeah, I go
90
into
degrees
that,
out.
and I do like the on tour thing, right? Like where you just make sure you don't stink, and you just dot yourself and use all the paper towels. And I go back to his office, and he's like, "Close the door," and I'm like,
Fuck. Damn it.
and he's like, I'm not going to do nights anymore. The girl that's voice tracking middays, we're letting her go. I'm moving to middays, and you start nights tonight." And I was like, "So wait, you want me to? I'm doing nights now." He's like, "Yeah, 7 to midnight. Instead of just doing Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 7, you're going to do Saturday, Sunday 2 to 7, and Monday through Friday 2 to 7. I can give you 8 hours. Like I'll pay you 8 hours worth of work for 7 hours worth of work. It's the best I can do. But hey, man, like I know you're still booking shows, so just mention them." And I was like, "All right, man, like." You need to give me a local music show. Give me a local music show Thursday nights at 11. And I'm on, dude. Like, I don't want to start the local music show right away. Like, I am totally cool with waiting, right? Like, planning it out, making it work. I was like, but those are my conditions. You want me to do this? I want the 11 p.m. hour on Thursday night to be all local music.
Oh, nice.
And he went and asked, and because he was just the assistant program director, which is my position now at the time, he went and got permission, and we were in.
Wow.
So I did nights that night, and I did nights for 4 years. Got moved to afternoon drive 7 years ago, right after the switch from butt rock to alternative. And it's been good, man. Like we've been
Dude,
able.
what a journey from start to finish you've had, dude. It's a wild ride and an unsuspecting journey into radio.
Dude, a lot of people tell me I should write a book, but I don't want to write a book. Right, like so I do podcasts all the time, right? Like because it's way easier for me to tell the story
Then have
than
to
it is for me to write it out. Because me in this setting, it is pretty natural, right? Like I feel like I'm a good conversationalist. I spend a lot of time, amping up my vocabulary because I've
Yeah,
done
you
this
got it, right?
with stuff for a really long time, right? Like,
Yeah.
like flip me over, I'm done on this side. And then when you flip it over, it's like, let's learn a bunch of new words and integrate them to our vocabulary. But it's one of those things, right? Like in origin story on that, my high school principal who hated me told me that I was not articulate after I had gotten into a fist fight in the 10th grade. And I looked up what articulate meant, and I was like, I'm going to prove this dude wrong. And then in my junior year, I got into another fist fight, and he told me that I was never going to amount to anything. So, hi, Mr. O'Donnell. Look what has happened.
Who's laughing now, dude?
Yeah.
You got Dixon on the radios now. Who's not?
Yeah. Like, and again, man, like, I understand that radio is not what it once was. I'm very fortunate to still be a part of it and doing something that doesn't require me to sit in a cubicle, wear a name tag, or deal with the public a whole lot, right? Like, and I'm also not one to, like, blow smoke up my own ass or run down my list of accolades, but I will simply say that, like, like anything else in life, I feel like I am successful within the world of radio based off of relationships and perspective, right? Like I'm one of the only people in radio that has seen every side of the music industry, right? Like
Yeah,
I've
that's a
witnessed
good
it
point, dude. I'm thinking like no one else has got the flip side of booking shows, booking venues, and managing bands too. Like
in being in bands, being the
being
talent.
in bands.
I've tour managed bands in the past.
Damn, dude.
You know, like I've touched every side of this industry. So like I always approach things in the nightclub setting where we would do whatever, right? Like I treat them the way I would want to be treated if I was them. If I'm that touring band that's coming to the club, and it'd be great if you were friendly and helpful. So I try to be friendly and helpful, right? Like I always treat people the exact same way they treat me if I don't know them, right? So like in radio, the general consensus is that when you go do a radio show, you get treated like shit. And I'm not going to say that that's true or false, but I will say that there is an awful lot of lack for the artists in the radio world. I think that given the fact that songs have become a commodity and not standalone pieces of art, which is what they are intended for, and there's this competitive nature in the awards world and for reaching number one and like all these other things, like it just kind of like sucks the life and passion out of a lot of things.
But it might have sucked the life and passion, but you're still a passionate guy. You're still loving the music that you get to play and be a part of.
I think a big part of that is because I'm granted and allowed access to a lot of things that a lot of people in my industry aren't, and it's because, right, like I treat everybody with respect. I'm honest when I talk to bands about their art, like in the Instagram space, in the Zoom space, right? Like I don't feign enthusiasm. I don't pull punches. Like I'm not going to tell you I adore something if I don't. Like if you go back and watch one of the almost 200 interviews I've done in the last 3 years, like you can tell when I really do like the artist, and you can tell when I'm trying to be a journalist and talking to somebody that I'm either not knowledgeable about or not a fan of. It
Right.
becomes a very, hey, we're here today with so-and-so. Your new album is called this. It came out on this date. The first single is called this, and you're about to go out on the tour. Tell me about how the record came together, right? And it just becomes like this very generic thing where like, you know, like there's
Like I couldn't imagine you interviewing Hatebreed like that.
it was a different time, man. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like Jamie's not a bad dude, right? Like he's a media guy. He hosted Headbangers Ball. He's hosted a whole host of other things, right? Like he's a dude that I think works in that way. But I feel like any artist that you talk to, right? Like you just have to show them respect for the fact that they're creating at a high level that is being broadcast out to the world, right? And my opinion doesn't matter, right? Like what I explain to people, and I've tried to for my entire career, is I don't have to like what you're doing. You just have to do it well and treat other people with respect. Respect your time, my time, the sound guy's time. Be on time. Don't be douchey to the other bands, right? Like if you're walking past somebody that's carrying something, offer to carry something too, right? Like it's not hard to just be a good person.
Yeah.
And I know that I haven't always been that guy, right? But like there's the clarity now.
But chapter 2.
Right. Well, chapter 2 is about to become chapter 3, right? Because like the radio stuff is all well and good. And I didn't come into this with an agenda, but I had a bang. Actually, half of this is bang. If you take the raspberry version of, it's the raspberry lime version of Bang, and you mix 50-50 with Coke Zero,
it just
yeah, it gets you amped up in a way where you want to tell people what's going on, right? Like, and for me, not to be confrontational or like cryptic in any way, but like I stopped actively booking shows and working at the Lost Horizon in 2018 when I had another health issue that I'm not going to dive into because it's a horror story. But I got to spend 3 months at home and really kind of like I enjoy sitting on my couch at night and not standing at the door of a bar
yeah,
with entitled musicians and drunk people.
right.
So I kind of like, I did that quiet retirement where I just never went back after I went out for my eye surgeries. And then a few months later, I had the conversation with John. I was like, hey, listen, man, like I'll do what I can when I can, but it's not going to be much. And it amounted to nothing. Right. And then I watched what transpired, right? Like I watched the boomer boot, clamp down on the necks of the young artists in this town harder than they ever did, because I wasn't there to try and lessen that blow by being somebody that brought attention to new upstart artists that maybe weren't polished but had promise. Because like if there's one thing I am known for, it is championing the underdog, right? Like there is nothing I like more than seeing promise in something and helping it grow, right? Like that's truly what I'm passionate about when it comes to music and the arts, is like giving that talented young person that's putting it all out there in an honest manner, and with a vision, who maybe isn't a popular kid or has a ton of friends, right? And just being like, all right, the dude on the radio, like who has picked 2 of the top 20 singles at Alternative for the bands this year, might know a little something about promise and what sounds good and what works in the radio world, in the commercial world, right? So
After all these years.
right, like you tune your ear enough, right? So like my passion in booking shows, right, was the fact that I always found myself a job within the organization in which the shows happened. So at Stylene's, I started as a bouncer. So I was bouncing, I was getting paid to bounce. Why do I need to take any money from the door? I've insulated myself so that the artists can continue to make a fair wage for putting their time and effort into it and then reinvest in themselves. When it came to Bridge Street Music Hall, I hired bouncers and I put myself behind the bar, because after all those years, it dawned on me that bartenders make more than bouncers. Right? So that was a step up, and now I'm making bank every night. Right? But I also held down other jobs so that I never had to really take money from the door. And I'm going to say this right now, because there's going to be somebody that comments on this that was like, I played for you in 1997 and you definitely didn't pay us what we were worth. Listen, man, I've been doing shows the exact same way since 1995. Right? Like there's a person that sits at the door that takes your money, that asks you which band you came to see. And then you get a mark. And you get paid based off the amount of people you bring. So if you didn't get paid well back in 1998, Mike,
because you didn't bring shit,
you didn't bring anybody to the show, and you can perpetuate whatever you want with your little group of people, like all these years later. But man, you're working Bang Tango, and I'm on the radio, and I've talked to Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons 4 times, bro. Like, and again, like I'm not saying that for clout, but it's just like the dude that's complaining about 1998 is working with a band from 1986. And like, Dan Reynolds does maybe 10 interviews, and the dude in Market 101 in Syracuse got one of those 10 based off of merit, right? Like, because they know that I'm not going to ask Dan about his ex-wife, or right, like anything that like is going to,
right, you're going to ask him stuff about his what's going on.
Tell me about like, hey man, like this new record is dope and it sounds so much different than the last record, but it definitely sounds like the next record. Talk to me about your process, right? Because it's very rare that somebody in my world wants to actually talk about the art, right? Like here's like David Cross does the absolute best morning show radio bit ever. Find it on YouTube or TikTok, because it's there in multitude, right? Where it's like, hey everybody, welcome to the Dick and Fart Show, and today I've got Dayglow. Sloan, how are you? Oh, I'm good, man. Thank you very much. So you're on tour, right? Yeah, we're playing Syracuse tonight. Tell us about it. Right? And there's no in the art. It's just like, I've got these 4 questions that I ask everybody. And then that's what I'm going to do. And it's up to them to present themselves well. And it's like, no. See, what you don't understand is they're really good at making art. And again, I'm making a broad generalization, but like most of them are awkward as shit, dude. Like people that are super creative are typically not great at social interaction. So like I go into,
you gotta help them with the conversation.
Exactly.
You gotta
right? Like
guide them a little bit.
you got to pitch underhand for the first couple questions, right? And I'm not going to say that like I've come up with a formula, but if I were to give you a formula for being good at interviews, it is, right? Like say thank you for your time, which you did a great job, dude. You nailed that.
Right at
Bro,
the
for
stop.
real.
Right at the stop.
That for me, that is a cardinal sin. When you not thank your guest for their time, right? And you said it best, you'd be doing anything else right now.
Dude, anything. You could be on the couch right now, just chilling,
Yeah.
doing your own thing.
Thank them for their time, introduce them, talk about their most recent thing, right? And then give a sincere compliment before asking the first question. And with an artist, or in some cases, a chef, or in some cases, an actor, the artistic type, you are going to disarm them, right? Like, because in that point, you've now made them feel like, oh, all right, this might be all right, right? Like, because they come into it like protecting their face, and then like it's like, oh, thank you for your time, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. So about the new album and the single, right? Like they could still get you, but like they're less defensive. And then when you make that first question, like the one that nobody else from radio is going to ask, right? Like when you ask a specific question about the recording process, a lyric, a sound, right? Like when you let them know within that first question that you have connected to the art in a way, the rest of that interview is going to be exactly what you want it to be. And it works because like, well, it only works if you're a real person. It only works if you're sincerely
genuine
that you're saying to the person on the other side of it. Because and I hate to put this poor girl on blast, but I don't know her. Go watch the post Coachella interview 2022 that the girl from K-Rock LA did with Brandon from Turnstile. That is, do the exact opposite of that. I was embarrassed for both of them in that moment watching that video.
Yeah, it's one thing I've learned about when you talk with people or interview them, or it's always about like asking like really good open-ended questions that can really get them to open about something, especially when you're interviewing someone as like who has a piece of art that they're sharing with the world. How you approach it is very systematic, and like that's like a genius way to approach like any interview with somebody.
Well, again, right, like it goes back to the thing I said earlier, which is I interview and talk to people the way that I would want to be approached.
Yeah, 1000%.
Right? Like, because like this is very casual, right? Like we're topic jumping. There's no itinerary. I don't really have anything that I'm promoting outside of the fact that shows are back at the Lost Horizon. We've taken our scene back from greedy people that don't want to share the wealth of shows with the artists that people are coming and paying to see. I mean, whatever, right? Like you got away with it for the last 4 years. I'm done. I'm back. Daddy's home. So yeah, you want to play the Lost Horizon? Hit me up. Easy to find. Find me on social media. Just put in DXN and don't put the Asian stuff, and you get me. Look for this face
right there.
But like, like this is fun for me, right? But like most of the time when I'm the guest on things like this, man, I get one of two things. I get the lazy interviewer that just kind of like wants the paltry amount of followers I have to look at their thing.
Oh yeah, right.
That becomes very apparent very early, and then I just give them the worst interviews ever. Like I go into Jared Leto mode where I just answer yes or no or not, right? Or just say next question.
Next.
But then like there are like I've done a couple of like I recently did a podcast called the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang podcast for my friend Dead Air Dave, and it was good, man. Like he's got a run sheet, right? Like, and I don't love being I don't know, like I don't like being the featured thing, right? Like, so I did it and
Yeah.
agreed to do it because like the dude from the Moss was also a part of it, and like at that point, like I just get to come in and I get to do my bit where like I get to tell you how much I love the Moss in front of the singer from the Moss.
Yeah,
And
right,
I
right.
just sit back and I watch you two talk.
Yeah.
And then I did that thing where I was like, I have an opinion on that. Can I jump in here? It ended up being this other thing, but it was still fun, right? But this is my preferred, like, and I'm gonna be honest, right? For a dude that has 3 or 4 podcasts, I don't really listen to much, right? Like, because for
Yeah.
me, when like, because
Especially when you're making so much, right?
well, for me, and again, right, like this is gonna make me sound like an obsessive weirdo. Um, you probably listen to podcast users. I see the research every day because I get research every day. You listen to it in the car, you listen to it while you're getting ready, you listen to it like while you're doing other things. And in every single one of those instances, I would prefer music.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for
like
sure.
I will like I'm more of like a podcast skimmer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I
You'll listen
really
to the one that you're like interested in.
for me, like, and I know like it's just like cliche, but I love Pat McAfee. Right, like I've been a lifelong Colts fan. I love his take on things. I had a 15-year stint in the professional wrestling world, so the fact that he also like moonlights within the world of professional wrestling is just like pretty dope. He's a fantastic broadcaster. I think he's the best wrestling announcer of this generation, bar none.
Oh, wow.
And the fact that that dude has always marched the beat of his own drum, right? Like still for me, best special teams punter or kicker tackle of all time, Pat McAfee. Nobody's ever going to do anything better than that, right? Like, and I love that he brings a little bit of like a wrestling character to what he does with the Pat McAfee show, which I know probably isn't technically a podcast, but I don't watch it. I listen to it. So for me, it's a podcast. But I don't listen to the whole thing, right? Like I'll let 5 minutes go by, and if I'm not interested, I zip
And
forward
then you're
3.
like, all right, music.
Yeah, and no, I always kind of skim through, make sure. Like this time of
Yeah,
year with the NFL draft, like I'm a big, weird fantasy football guy. So like the draft is like a fun thing for me because like
for sure.
when you're in the fantasy world, you do like 2 or 3 mock drafts.
Yeah, just to
And I
get
don't know
opinion,
any of
right?
these kids, dude. I don't do any of these kids. I don't follow college football. I don't like college football. But it's like for me, it's like because I can't shut my brain off. Like I'm not happy unless I'm thinking about something. Like I
Yeah.
lull myself to sleep these last couple of weeks doing like mock drafts in my head because I memorized who had the top 10.
Just doing the roster.
Where I'm just like, hopefully the Colts trade up to the number 3 spot so they can get, Will Levis and because otherwise they're gonna be stuck with Anthony Richardson and I don't know the Richardsons, like
Yeah.
just that
You go down
whole
this rabbit hole until you pass out.
yeah, essentially that's me every night, right? Like when we had 2CW active and running, like I would do like fantasy booking our 2CW roster in my head as my nighttime routine, right? Like I also do that. Hey man, you've got a $1 million budget, book a festival for you, right? And I'll just be like, okay, well,
All right, let's do this.
headliner would probably be about $150,000.
Yeah, yeah. And then you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just McAfee. McAfee's my guy. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't listen to my own podcasts. It is very rare.
I edit mine. I do all my, so I'm just used to it, but I also do a lot of videos and stuff. So it's not, I've grown accustomed to it.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I don't edit nothing, dude. Like
Yeah,
the
you just put it out there.
videos I do, like band videos, like if somebody performs or whatever. But like for me, and again, I'm not speaking out against your practices. For me, I'm lazy.
No, dude. Like this is
I
this is
hate
pretty unedited.
more
Unless
than
like someone I've had only 2 guests ever say, I didn't like that question. Can we take that out? But other than that, it's pretty unedited.
I'm an open book, dude. Like I don't have like that thing that most people do where it's like, hey man, let me talk to you about this person. Just don't tell that person. It's like
Yeah.
if I'm gonna say something to you about somebody, I would say it to them too.
Yep. Amen, dude. That's why I like you, Scott. You're transparent, open,
Yeah.
and genuine, dude.
Thank you. Those are like three of the words I have tattooed in kanji on my leg. If we're being 100%
Really?
honest, yeah, I got that tattooed on me like it's probably 19 or 20. I was
Hell
obsessed
yeah,
with
dude.
Japanese culture and totally ignorant.
I love that
Also,
stuff.
fun one. Which one is it? So this is a Ben K from Resurrected tattoo. That
Ben, dude, I love Ben.
that used to be three kanji that were supposed to say love, passion, devotion. And it turns out like I went on a couple dates with a Japanese girl in my early 30s
And that's not
and,
what it meant.
and met her parents. And her dad was like, "Why do you have the word laundromat tattooed on your arm?"
Oh
And I
no.
was like, "Excuse me, sir. No, this, right? Like just being the dickhead.
Yeah,
It's like, listen, I know, I understand that you were born and raised in Japan, but this
but
this is love. This is the kanji symbol for love, right?" And he's just like, "No, I like that's laundromat." And then he
that's funny,
literally
dude.
started pulling up photos of signs from Japan of laundromats, and I was just like,
Okay.
"I'm
Oops.
not exactly happy with Crazy Jim right now."
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but then again, I remember that I sourced the reference, so like, how can I be
Uh,
them? Um,
that's funny. Well, who else better to cover it up than Ben? Ben and Jamola are amazing. I love those guys.
listen, man, for me, like, I did not know either of those dudes, either of them at all. Met them when my best friend started tattooing for them, right? Like, we all went to a downtown event that Cha's band was playing. Ben and Jamola showed up with friends. Um, and I met them there, and they both seemed kind of standoffish, which in hindsight we figured out they were somehow intimidated by me because I was like, I don't know, elder statesman of the music scene and had been around forever.
And then
So,
you found out that they're two of the nicest people ever.
well, the way I found that out is at my benefit, I showed up and they had made I Heart Dixon shirts
Oh,
that they were selling and giving the proceeds to me, right? Like these two guys that I met once that my best friend works at their shop, like went out of their way to not only design but print and then sell
wow, that's
t-shirts,
crazy.
give me
That's what
every
I'm talking about.
so like I immediately was just like a fan of both of those dudes,
Yeah.
right? Like, and here's what I'll say about both of them, and the reason that I love them on such like high level is that, man, as soon as like shows like Ink Master started on TV, the tattoo industry changed, and man, like it really wasn't about the art anymore. It was about being part of that tattoo scene or that tattoo culture. And
Yeah, but
hardcore
Ben and
had something to do
Jamola,
with that. Yeah.
they're all about the art, dude.
And that's what I love,
They're
right? Like
so
I
talented.
remember when Resurrected had like the weird like the counter with the swingy doors here, and then like you would go back and it was set up like it was like the early days of Resurrected, right? And Jamola would sit like towards the back in like the little alcove in front of the basement stairs.
That must have been before I got tattooed by him.
This was like year one of Resurrected being in
Oh,
the
okay.
new spot on Clinton.
Okay.
Um, and I remember walking into Sea Chalks. I think I was getting tattooed, and I rolled in Jamola's painting, right?
Yeah,
Like
I know
in
it's cool. He's
in
yeah.
his little tattoo drawing cubby. He's got like a little like 11 by 17 or 11 by 7. Like it was like this long skinny thing. And I just remember him like painstakingly like looking at it and then looking at his palette,
Yeah.
right? And looking at it. And I just remember being like, so like I was just like, all right, I loved Jamola before, but now like,
Yeah, right. Now.
wow, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. I feel like even if he gets mad at me for this, my best friend, if he gets mad at me for this, whatever. We've definitely had bigger fights than this. I remember we lived together before I met my wife, and he came home. He's like, man, fucking Ben and Jamola want me to start painting more. And I was like, dude, do you not understand that that means they see something in you and they're encouraging your artistic vision to expand out beyond you tracing shit, redrawing it and then tattooing it on somebody, right? Like they
Yeah.
see what in you, what I see in you, right? Like as like the dude that's become your like official mentor, right? Like this is a good thing that some older guys are seeing the same thing in you that I am.
Fresh perspective.
Yeah, it enforces my already high opinion of you. And I remember him being pissy about it, right? And then finally like succumbing to it, doing it, and then really finding himself in it, right? Like, and then, you know, I had to do a thing where I pulled Ben aside and I was like, yo, thanks for doing that, right? Like he's actually painting without the whole reason being you told him to. Right. Like my boss just told me I had to paint more. Now
they saw something in him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or like in
That's such a cool story.
Cha's also that dude that like if he watches a YouTube video like 1.5 times, he can do that thing. It doesn't matter what that thing is. Yo, this motherfucker watched 2 videos on how to tattoo portraits. 2 videos. And then did one of the nicest David Bowie portraits I've ever seen in my life.
Only 2 videos.
2 videos. Didn't do a
it's like the scene in the Matrix.
Skin or nothing. Right? Like just watch like 2 videos of like, okay. Right? And then did some adjustments to like his tattoo gear and then the ink. And then he went and he watched like a couple of specific parts of it, shut it down and was like, all right, let's go. And then did it. And I was just like,
that's the it's like the Matrix. He plugged in the floppy disk and downloaded all of his info.
That's a blind spot for me. I will admit that I've never seen a single Matrix movie.
Oh, it's okay.
There are huge cultural moments that I have no perspective on because while all of these things that became like massive things like the Matrix and the Harry Potters and the Lord of the Rings and there's a whole bunch of like new Star Wars movies, like all of that.
And you're just like, no thanks.
That dudes my age are usually obsessed with. Like I was too busy like booking shows, going to shows, playing shows, right? Like
that was your
20-year period of my life where like you couldn't get me to sit down and watch a movie.
Yeah, because you just want to be moving, dude. You're a guy that's got to move.
Well, dang. Absolutely, dude. I feel like
Can you believe this, dude? Hour and a half has flown by already.
See?
Hour and a half, dude. Isn't that nuts?
We soaked in the joy, bro. I feel like,
dude, I just want to say thanks for doing this. This is really cool.
Honestly, thank you. Right?
Oh,
like,
dude, it's so much fun. I feel like we could go on for another hour and a half.
Well, tell you what, right? Like, let's reconnect soonish, like maybe mid-May, right? Let's see what period of summer your schedule and radio schedule match up so we can go set a date to go help with the food bank.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Within that, we'll produce another piece of content. Yeah. And then after we get through the volunteering, the content release, we'll circle back and we'll do this again, but we'll do it with you as the guest.
All right. Yeah. I'm here for it.
Right. And then we'll juxtapose because like the thing that intrigues me about you, man, is you remind me of me in the context of that you have this sort of Renaissance man vibe to you, right? Like I love young people like yourself. No, for real, man. Like, because it's impressive to me that you're a young professional who is successful, who for everything I see is a fantastic husband and father.
Oh, man.
Right? With the passion for the martial arts that you have, right? For your charitable contributions, your mindfulness of that, the relationships you have with your close friends and colleagues. I know a lot of your jiu-jitsu guys, man. Like a lot of them have worked for me or have come up in the music scene. So like I get a vantage point that I don't know that you're aware of, like most people aren't aware of. Like I'm very much a sit back and watch people kind of guy, right? And the fact that you balance your life so well to be able to do all of these things at the level that you do them at and don't marginalize any of it, right? Like you fully throw yourself into everything you do with intent and passion, and you've committed to doing these things. And I've watched you get better in this setting, right? Like,
Thanks, man.
I've watched you via video get better and better at Tai Chi,
Yeah. Thanks,
right?
man.
Like, you're somebody that I wish I was more like at your age, right?
Okay.
Like, it's good for me as somebody who, for a little while, kind of gave up on younger people based on my personal experiences, to take myself out of that equation and take like a good look around for young men like yourself that um, aren't the stereotype that female comedians talk about, or that, like basic bitches bitch about on TikTok, right? Like, I'm at a point in my life where like broad generalizations don't work for me anymore. I'm doing things on a more individual by individual basis. And Cory, heartfelt, man, you're an impressive young man to me, and I respect the hell out of you. And I know that you are bound to continue on this path to do really good things. And like, I know that you have a head on your shoulders where you do these things because you enjoy doing these things, and you don't have this expectation that you're going to be famous from it. And man,
Oh, God,
if
no.
we're being honest, I hope you are, right? Because you're a very earnest and sincere young man with an excellent point of view, who works hard and throws himself fully into everything. And that's a rare thing, not only in the context of a young person your age, but in society as a whole. I think that a lot of people spend too much time with one foot in and one foot out, and you are a 2-foot motherfucker in a multitude of ways. And man, I respect the hell out of your hustle.
Damn. You're gonna go make me cry happy tears, dude. Thank you for those. Those were very kind words. I appreciate you, Scott. You're a
I
wonderful human being.
appreciate you, sir. Just
Yeah.
keep doing what you're doing, and I'll tell you the same thing that I tell everybody that I have conversations like this with. Um, instead of thanking me or extending like a debt of gratitude, just pay it forward. And I know that you're a dude that's already doing that, so I don't need to ask that, but I do want to put that out into the world, right? Like, um, man, I have booked almost 4,000 shows in my life. I have played over 750 different bands on 95X in the last 11 years. And I know that some people take that for granted, right? Like, but I know that there are people that means the world to. And it's moments like this that give me an opportunity to say, like, you're welcome. So, like, stop saying thank you and thank me by doing it for somebody that can take value from you passing along the thing that I gave to you. Right? Like, and ultimately, I think that's how we as a society stop imploding and start becoming a community, because ultimately it's great to have a close-knit circle of friends, but how much better would it be if the ideals that we held, the people who were close to us, we held everybody to, right? And I don't know that that's a hard thing to do, right? I think that if we take our group of friends and expand that to a broad part of an art scene, and then from that art scene to the community as a whole, and from the community to the metro community, right? Like the suburbs, that if we do that and we're just kind to each other and mindful, and we can all sort of make a point to be more self-aware, that society could be better. And instead of like public freak out videos of quote unquote Karens on TikTok, maybe like, share one of the 95X Cares videos and let's help get a dog adopted. Or maybe, instead of going through the coffee drive through and spending $9 on a coffee that you more than likely spill half of on the rest of the trip to work, like maybe just Venmo that money to the food bank, or rip off one of those tabs at Wegmans every time you check out, because it's less than $3 and that feeds one person for an entire day, right? Like, think about, like, dude, I've got more than $4 worth of change in the cup holder of my car.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so that means that almost probably everybody does, because I've found that I am fairly pedantic as it pertains to other human beings. So right in line. Like, what if we all just did that, right? Like, I think I just had an idea that I'm not going to share right now because we're going to talk about it like not,
Yeah, we're gonna.
not for the
It's
world.
a beautiful way. It's a beautiful way to end a podcast. We can
Yeah,
leave people on the hook.
You led me down the path to an idea, sir.
All right. Well, we'll be hush hush, and we're gonna talk about it off air, ladies and gentlemen. Scott Dixon.
Thank you very much. I can hear your thunderous applause in my imagination.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Cory Cast. I really appreciate the time that you spent listening and even listening to the full episode to get you to this point. I just want to say I'm just so appreciative and so thankful that I have so much love and support for these episodes. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, reach out to me. I'm always looking for new people. Let's talk about what you're passionate about. Let's talk about your hobbies. Let's give you a positive platform to talk about the things that matter to you. Do me a favor, make sure you hit subscribe, like, follow, leave a review of the podcast. All those little things will help this podcast grow. Because without you guys, there is no podcast. And I am just so grateful that you're taking the time to listen to it today. Thank you so much.